So you want to learn Japanese? Then this video is exactly what you've been looking for. Hi, my name is Silas. I've been studying Japanese for 4 years now and am currently studying in Japanese at a Japanese university. Before we jump right in, let me first give you a quick overview of what I'm going to cover in this video. First of all, I'm going to tell you the basic principles that I have employed during my Japanese studies that helped me to get to the level that I'm currently at. Afterwards, we will have a look at a timeline that I have employed during my studies and that I am sure will also help you get your Japanese to the next level. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. First point. Try to get as much exposure as possible early on. What do I mean by that? This will help you not only with vocabulary and grammar, but more importantly also with intonation. So how do Japanese native speakers pronounce a word? What is the intonation like? And all of this stuff that becomes really important later on if you want to reach a certain level. And if you start to learn that, or if you start to get this input early on, it will be much easier for you later on. Of course, there are a variety of ways you can get such input. For example, movies, YouTube videos, music, news articles, and so on. Now, for me personally, I mainly use movies or shows, YouTube videos, and music to get this exposure. What is really important when you do this is that you should never look at any translations while you're watching a TV show or while you're listening to music, because that actually prevents you from really concentrating on the Japanese. Of course, this is very hard and very boring in the beginning, because in the beginning you are not going to understand anything. For example, when I started watching Japanese shows in pure Japanese without any subtitles, it took me around, I'd say, half a year to understand basic conversations in those movies. And those 6 months were really, of course, boring. But trust me, it is really worth it, because there will be a point where you suddenly feel like, okay, I kind of get what they are saying right now. And this is a really rewarding experience. Of course, you're not going to be able to understand everything, but as soon as you get to the level of, okay, I understand this basic, easy conversation, it's really rewarding and it helps you keep going. Also, another really important aspect of getting exposure is the fact that you learn the way of thinking, or the way that things are said in Japanese. What do I mean by that? Basically, in Japanese, you just say things differently than in English, for example. So, for example, in English, it's totally fine to say, I love your handbag. If you would directly translate that sentence into Japanese, it would be, あなたのバッグが好きです. And for Japanese people, if you would say that to a Japanese person, it's very unnatural, a very unnatural way to say this. First of all, the word ski is very strong. Usually people only use it for like something that they really love. For example, if you love a person, you say ski. And it's really weird to say it like that in Japanese. And another thing is that you would generally not use the personal pronoun anata, which means you, which just makes the sentence really, really unnatural for a native speaker. And what you learn when you get exposure is how people say that stuff actually in Japanese. Second point, learn hiragana, katakana, and kanji from the very beginning. Why do I say that? I am yet to hear of a single person that can't read hiragana, katakana, or kanji, but speaks very good Japanese. It just is not possible. So I would really recommend you start learning hiragana and katakana, and then really quickly move on to kanji, because it is going to help you in so many regards. Not only will it upgrade your Japanese abilities as a whole, but also it will make you understand certain words just by knowing the kanji. For example, the word volcano is kazan in Japanese, and it is literally written with the kanji for fire and mountain, so fire mountain. And thanks to kanji, even if you don't know words yet, if you know the kanji, you basically, or in many cases, you can get the word's meaning. Now, when you learn hiragana, katakana, or kanji, please do yourself a favor and do not use any translated books. For example, books that show a kanji and then explain it in English. That again, similar to what I've said earlier, mixes two languages, and I think that's really not good for your learning process. At least in my experience, I tried to avoid that kind of stuff as much as I could, and I feel like looking back, it really helped me. So, how would I learn kanji instead? What I've done is that I bought a book which is targeted towards Japanese elementary school kids and learned with that book. Now, I guess there are many books of that kind, and I will link some in the description. But what those books typically do is they explain the kanji with pictures. And that is really, I think, a great way to still be fully immersed in Japanese, but also understand the meaning of the kanji. And also, if you learn kanji, from what I've learned, it really helps to write them yourself often. For example, write a kanji 20 times when you learn it. Doing so will really help you remember them better. Also, when you're learning kanji, kanji have something that is called bushu, which is basically a part of a kanji that also appears in other kanji. So if you learn bushu, then you can look at certain kanji and get the rough, I'd say, direction of the meaning. So for example, there's a bushu which looks like this, which when used in composition in a kanji, usually has something to do with your body. Like, this is the kanji for arm, this is the kanji for leg. You see that both kanji have the same structure inside. And that really also, again, helps you guess what kanji mean before you even know exactly know what they mean. Third point, start learning with textbooks, but abandon them really quickly. Usually, textbooks teach rather artificial language. You probably have made this experience if you have looked at a textbook in your native language where there are some sentences that are grammatically correct, but no one would ever say them like that in real life. That's why I would recommend you, also for Japanese, to only use a textbook for learning the basic vocabulary and grammar that you need to get going from there. Now, what I have used for this is actually a blog from a person called Tai Kim. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but I will link it down in the description. It's a really helpful resource and it's completely free that helps you with the basic grammar in Japanese. And if you understand this grammar, you can easily move on from there. Also, not really related to studying, but to testing yourself, I would really encourage you to take the JLPT, so the official Japanese test from the Japanese government, regularly. Because you can test yourself and you can test your current ability, at least in the parts of Japanese where you don't have to do anything yourself, because the JLPT only tests for listening, grammar understanding, and reading. So you won't have to actually produce anything yourself. But again, it really helps you have a look where you're standing right now. It really helps you understand what your current level is. And in my case, for example, I did a JLPT N2, and about a year later I did a JLPT N1. And I think taking the N2 really helped me realize what my weak points were at that time, and really helped me focus on that and I think partly because I focused on those weak points and got better in that regard, I was able to pass the N1. So I think this is really, really helpful. Last point. If you somehow have the opportunity to go to Japan, whether it's studying abroad, working here, please do yourself a favor and do that. Because, especially for people that stay here longer, so students or people working here, you will not only be exposed to Japanese much more often and much more frequently, but you will also learn more about the culture and the behavior of people, and that will also help you advance your Japanese skills, because if you learn the behavior while learning the language, it will make for a much better whole. Because if I can speak a language perfectly and know about the do's and don'ts, then that comes off to the native speaker as if I'm already way better at Japanese than I am only when it only comes to speaking. So if you have the opportunity, please do yourself a favor and do that. Those were the basic points that I followed and that I think really will help you when studying Japanese. And now we will have a look at a specific learning timeline that will help you get fluent in Japanese, and you can adjust to your specific needs. So let's have a look at the timeline. First of all, as I said, you should probably be learning hiragana and katakana. It is just a must to do, and you will probably be done with this in about a month. Next, you can start learning basic vocabulary and grammar. As I said before, there are a lot of resources for this. You can use standard textbooks like Minna no Nihongo, and you can also use internet resources like I did with Takem's Guide to Learning Japanese. I will link the guide down below. It really helped me, and I think it will also be really helpful for you. Third point, start learning kanji. When we start out learning kanji, we typically want to learn the easy kanji. That means kanji that are usually learned in elementary school. For that, there are several fully Japanese books, and I will link one that I personally really liked down in the description. Fourth point, we want to start getting exposure at this point. That means we are going to watch movies, YouTube videos, listen to music. For YouTube videos, we can watch videos that are specifically targeted at non-native speakers. And if you're into it, you can also, of course, watch movies where you probably won't understand much, but it will really help you, and I encourage you to do so. And of course, as I said before, please, when you do so, when you get exposure, do not use subtitles in any other language than Japanese. If you've done those steps for a while, you've probably reached a level where you can easily pass N5 or N4 or even N3 JLPT exam. And I think you should really take the exam to see where you're at and where you can improve. Next, after the JLPT, we know where to improve and how can we improve best by gaining more exposure. That's why we will start reading newspaper articles, watching more intermediate videos in Japanese, movies and all that stuff. Now for newspaper articles, it really helps with understanding more formal Japanese and also really tests your knowledge of kanji. For example, what I personally often used during my studies is the news that are written in comparatively easy Japanese by NHK. I will also link the website down in the description. These news are basically normal news, but they are written in more easy Japanese with less kanji, but still there are kanji used, and less longer sentences. After that, you'll probably have all that you need to move on to more advanced kanji, which means middle and high school kanji. And again, there you can really use a book of your choice. I would just encourage you to not use a book that has explanations in another language than Japanese. And afterwards, the two last points are really just keep on getting more exposure and then test yourself with a JLPT. At that point, when you've gained even more exposure, you will probably be able to pass the N2, if not even N1 JLPT. And on paper, you will be able to work in Japan. From that point on, of course, your studies are not over. You will still have to You would still have a lot of things that you think are not perfect yet and you will have to improve. But from that point on, you're not a beginner, you're very high intermediate, even if not even an advanced Japanese speaker. And from that point on, you will probably know best yourself what to do to improve. With that being said, that is it for today's video. I hope you liked it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.